It's going to be a very short lecture, so those who join us late will not come and meet us. This morning, I want us to quickly spend some few moments, it shouldn't be more than an hour, to look at politics, power in action. And basically, this was where we got to that we were not able to go through this the last time we met. But we started some discussions on power and politics. We spoke about the fact that the issue of power comes up because somebody has something that someone else needs it badly. And that's where politics come in. And normally, the more you want what the other person has, the more powerful you become as the person that the person will be sorting after, basically. So if you have something that somebody else wants, then that brings in the issue of politics. We also spoke briefly about sexual harassment, and we mentioned the fact that the sexual harassment is about unequal power relationships, and it is something that happens a lot within the work environment. We clearly indicated that, yes, there's no doubt in my mind that women go through a lot of harassment in the work environment. But if you look at some of the discussions that we had, if you remember and go back to your slides, you will notice that there's some subtle and sometimes very difficult experiences that it's not very clear whether it's harassment or not. And some of them is sexual innuendos. So for example, when people dress in a suggestive manner, or let's say a woman, you dress and half of your breast is showing, it is harassment. Okay, so even though it is not a license for men to attack women in that manner, when you dress in a certain way, it is harassment to the other party. It can also be that men can also dress in suggestive ways that can also be construed as harassment. But what you need to understand is that the fact that you are being harassed does not mean you must act in an inappropriate manner. You have to be very careful because people have a choice as to what they want to dress. But I also think that we must have an image, and whatever image you bear and you have, it's also reflecting how you dress. And I personally share the view that you attract the kind of people that you attract based on how you dress. And there are interesting characters out there. So sometimes you think that you are showing forth some vital statistics you have. I wish you well. You can certainly attract the people that fall within the brackets. These are my mindsets, you know. Now, so politics, power in action. So this talks about political behavior, and it talks about activities that are not required as part of one's formal role in organization, but that can influence or attempt to influence organizations' way of distributing advantages or disadvantages. So what this basically means that we are just recapping briefly that what are political behavior? It is something that people do in the workplace that is not part of the role. When you go through job descriptions, you will not see anything on political behaviors, but because individuals will always come together and then it will lead to issues of conflict and disagreements and one seeking to stay ahead of the game and those kind of dynamics, politics will rear its head. And anytime politics comes about, it is the person who is playing that political game will be seeking to get some kind of favor, or sometimes in a subtle way put the other person in a negative light so that they look good. And the essence of all this is that we want to be perceived as the preferred over the others. It's also important to touch on the fact that this comes about because normally the thing that we want may be limited. And remember that we spoke about it last week, or if you don't, if you go back to your slides, we spoke about the fact that when something is limited, when there's a demand for it, when it's limited, there's a lot more tendency that the politics of getting it to be higher. you see. So when we are all seeking to get into a certain position or a role of it in an organization, we may have all started the same day, but only one person can get to a certain level. That itself can be a potential for politics, okay? And there are some individuals that are very ruthless when it comes to this. Ruthless in the sense that they care less about what they do. Once they are aiming for it, that is what they will do. So they are not required. I mean, politics is not required. It's not the requirement for the job that we are supposed to be doing, but they do come up. And we, as I said, it comes because we want to influence things in our favor. We want to disadvantage others in the process. But there's also something we call legitimate political behavior. This one, we all do that all the time, knowingly or unknowingly, especially when you go to work and you are talking about the fact that, oh, you know, this government is really making things difficult. Now we cannot even get light to work with and all that. These are all political, like complaining, you know. Sometimes you meet somebody that you think that do not share your same political orientation, to avoid them, kind of thing. You know, these are things that we do that are all politics. That are things that we do that are all politics. Okay, but even though we call it legitimate behavior, it's important. I mean, you remember that we are talking about what happens in the work environment. Yes, it might be legitimate, but is it the right thing to do? The fact that you are not going to be shot for doing that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. So, of course, then we take it, the next level will be, it's about our values, isn't it? So then the individual preferences and values come into the issue. But all I'm trying to say is that we do engage in some form of politics every now and then, knowingly or unknowingly, but they appear harmless. That is why we do not even think that it's politics. Then we also have what we normally talk about illegitimate political behavior. Illegitimate political behavior. This is the extreme political behavior that violates the implied rules of the game. People begin to sabotage. And I know that, you see, talking about this, let me just quickly go back to the first point to say that, yes, even though politics or political behavior is not part of the job role, I'm one person that normally say that politics is not a bad word. It's not a bad word. It's how you play it. It's how you play it. If you are always available when everybody says, I cannot do it, you're always available. We just have to call you, make yourself available. Sometimes you have to make certain sacrifices to show up. But others are quick to say that, oh, I have a meeting, I have this, I have that, and they are giving excuses. There's indirectly some politics being played, especially if you understand, if you read the environment, you get to know that, look, they're always giving excuses. But even though I also have an excuse to give, I decide to go and do the work. It is a kind of politics, but this is not a bad politics. It's somebody, it speaks of an individual who understands the environment within which they're operating. Do you get it? So I'm just talking about this, that politics can be subtle in a way that it's not a bad thing, but there can also be an illegitimate political behavior where you actually violate the rules of the game. And that is where we begin to sabotage people, and even whistleblowing, you know, can be a form of illegitimate political behavior. So what I'm trying to let us understand is that we need to understand these things. And you see, normally, when you are doing the right thing, you will know, in my view, you know, okay? That is why sometimes some people can play dumb, even though they know that they are playing dumb, because they know the right thing, but they are trying to pretend as if they don't know what's right. So the illegitimate political behavior is what we must watch. Anytime you seek to get an advantage ahead of somebody through very unorthodox ways and trying to damage somebody else to get ahead, then that is a kind of politics that we should never, be found involved in. Yes, I know that, yes, it does not, I guess we have to explain. So in this case, I'm looking at it in the negative light. Bright was asking whether whistleblowing is a bad thing. but you know that, yes, it can be useful when it comes to dealing with corruption. You're right. But sometimes in this, because the heading that is under, it is when you do it with a view of not correcting an evil like corruption, but doing it to damage somebody else. So that was the mindset for putting it there. But I get what you mean. But broadly, when we talk about whistleblowing, we have to go further to explain what kind of thinking is behind the deed. Okay, so so why do we get politics? Why do we get politics? We get politics because of scarce resources normally in the work environment. And I think I hinted in it much earlier. Politics is a natural result of resource scarcity. Limited resources lead to competition in political behaviors. Like a point I made earlier on, there can only be one. We are all junior officers now. We need one person or two people to become senior or to become officers. And we all join the organization at the same time. There must be a way of getting one of us to get to the top. Yes, it's better if you are using your expert power or reference power. But there are some instances that people would realize that, look, I better play the politics of it. They may not have totally what it takes to get the work done, but they'll use that kind of political behavior to get to that level. And that is where people can become a bit more dangerous to their own colleagues and friends because they want a certain position. But the point here is that when we have limited resources, it's a potential for political behaviors. Look at what happens in the political parties. There's always somebody trying to get ahead of the other, and sometimes people talk about things about grassroots, and the grassroots are saying this, but all they are doing, they're just pushing their own agenda. So when that is an environment that when you find yourself, you might be very careful. Anything that you hear, you need not to believe it. You have to verify for yourself. Because as the name goes, politics, okay? It's about limited resources, but then trying to get ahead because the resources are not enough for us all to get access to it. So politics is a very, and so do not be, if you understand these things I'm talking about, you'll never be surprised at all when it comes to politics. Never be surprised. I mean, some of us, we are never surprised about anything when it comes to politics. Nothing, absolutely nothing. They have the same mother, the same father, okay? But of course, there will be one sometimes a shade above the other, but broadly, they have the same kind of principles to a large extent. Okay, so whether it's in Ghana or it's in the UK or it's in the US, look at Trump's ways of politics. It's even much dirtier than what sometimes we see in our environment. Try to make the other person really look very bad so that they will look good. You get it? So I hope that after some of these discussions, you will never be surprised about anything at all in politics. And that is why, if you want to get into it, you need to be ready for it, think through it, make sure that your family has, you run through this lecture with your family to understand what politics is, because they will hear very bad things about you. But if they understand it, they will not be moved, even though these things will come. Now, judgments, the second point, our judgments on quality differ markedly. So we talk about why do we get politics? We get politics because people look at things differently. And that is the problem. The problem is that when we begin to look at things differently and there's no clarity, especially in the organizational space, yes, we do know that we will look at things differently because we are all not the same. I define perception when we're looking at issues of personality to say that it is one's view of the world. Our perception is the way we see the world, and it's going to be different from each other. But the more we open the system up for variations, when we do not bring clarity to things as a way of assessing things, then we allow politics to come through. Judgment on quality differ markedly based on observers' perception. So, for example, if I do a work and the work is of a certain standard, somebody can blame you because in their view, it is not to a standard. But what do we mean by the standard? Is this the person's standard or an pre-agreed standard? So blaming others do take place in politics because of that lack of ambiguity. Documenting decisions. Sometimes also there are some instances that people play politics by documenting decisions. There are some people who the least thing or anything that they know, and it's a very subtle way, they will put it on your file just to damage your future. You know, and some people do that, and it's so sad that sometimes, you know, if you are into leadership, one of the principles that you have to learn, and I'm sharing some of my secrets with you, is that what you can say, do not write. When you have to write, then it's gotten to a level where it's like the world is coming to an end now. Okay, so that is why normally people are not just fired when they do something, you commit an error. You are called before the powers that be, we speak to you, we give you, sometimes you are given a warning letter and all that, just to warm you up. And those things, the way you write the warning letter, it's not to damage the person, but to let the person know that, look, we take this thing very seriously. We are writing this to alert you that you are really moving in an area where it can affect you overall. So just be very careful and all that. Okay. But there are some people that the least thing they document, even though there's no marked rules, and we are not able to challenge it because there are no rules. I sit on the seat, so I do what I choose. And anytime I talk about power and politics, these are the things that really comes to me, because you see, sometimes we forget about the fact that we are so human. And there are some people who think that they are powerful, and therefore they choose to do what they please. Please, if you are in the habit of damaging others, why do you not document the other person's issue, but you are documenting the other one because you don't like the other person? These are serious matters when we begin to use these kind of means to damage people's future and destroy people's future. And as I keep saying, and I've said several times on these engagements, that I have seen life be very interesting. And you must be very careful when you are doing things to damage other people, because it will surely come to you or your children. Okay? It may be a very harsh saying, but it tells you that I believe this. Okay, so if you will so much power and you use it to damage other people, be careful. Be careful. You play politics with people's future, you play politics with people's life, be careful. And the reason why we do organizational behavior is for a reason, is so that we will learn, improve on ourselves, and then we can also be able to help other people. Because we cannot give what we do not have. If the things that we have discussed for the past so many weeks does not get into your system, you will not be able to influence other people. Because people watch, it's not so much of what you say, but what you say, does it really manifest in your own life? So my advice to you is that, as I keep saying this, and I say this all the time, because I have no doubt in my mind that there are going to be individuals who will so much power and authority, or there will be, or there is. There are people in there. And be careful how you play your politics. Okay, be careful how you play your politics. When the essence is to damage other people, be careful, because it will surely come to you, no doubt about it. The third point talks about most decisions are made under ambiguous conditions, and that is also a reason why I think that lack of clarity, lack of an objective standard encourages political maneuvering of subjective reality. So anytime there's no clarity and it's not very open and we cannot see through, then we empower people. You know, sometimes even organizations where there are objective ways of measuring performance and promoting people, people still find a way of bringing in subjectivity because they don't like somebody. Okay, and when you do that, you really cause a lot of pain to people. So it's very important that we take this issue of politics quite seriously. It has its part where you position yourself well not illegitimately to damaging other people, but pushing yourself well to be favored among the others. When you have knowledge, you will know how to do it right. But when you have knowledge, you also can decide not to do it right. And that's my advice to those who may want to damage other people or do damage other people. Some have been done it and they continue to do that. But once you do that, there's certainly going to be a price. The voice mutes at certain point. I think it's your connection. Okay, all right. So this is not a question. Yes. I think that your system may be playing out. So all I'm trying to say here is that let's be careful about politics. The politics of organizations are real. And when you are the lower end of it, you see how negative it is. But when you go through the ranks and you get to the top, then it becomes very nice. Okay, so the very people that sometimes complain about things that were done to them that they were not happy about, when they find themselves in a powerful position, they do worse things. But I've also indicated, I have no doubt in my mind that if you do worse things to other people, it will come back to you. I've no doubt at all. So my advice to you is that use your power to serve, use your power in a legitimate manner. Do not use your power to abuse people. Do not use your power to take advantage of other people. We've spoken about sexual harassment. Do not use your power to harass people. Do not use your power to do illegitimate things. Power we get to serve. Okay, so this would be my advice to you. And as I keep saying, I know that this will come up in your journey, whether you take what I'm saying or not. Now, what is the normal responses that come with political behaviors, especially in the negative way? Most employees have low to moderate willingness to play politics and have the following reaction to politics. Now, what this means is that most employees do not play politics. They have low to moderate willingness. They are unwilling. But you see, it also brings some points to us. It tells you that there are some few individuals who always play politics. So there are two things that comes to my mind. There's normally those who play politics are few, and I'm talking about the negative one, of course. But it's also because the people at the top who also play politics, because of the position they have, they normally have, life is like as you get to the top, the number reduces. Those at the top are normally the minority. You get it? So the minority are the ones who play politics. You can also have minority at the base level, though, but largely within our setting, you have people who will power and they use their power to play politics and to damage other people. Okay. And as I keep advising you, make sure that you do not use your power wrongly. Perceptions of organizational politics. Now, because people have low to modest willingness to, okay, the appetite normally is not there. When they experience politics, it manifests in some of these ways: decreased job satisfaction. You do not look forward to going to work. You don't enjoy the work you do. Anxiety and stress. People are stressed because of politics. Increased turnover. You have people joining and leaving almost every month, and then reduced performance. There's a strong link between people not happy with their job and performance. So I'm not surprised that when there's decreased job satisfaction, it can lead to reduced performance. You get it. So the employee responses to organizational politics will be not satisfied with their work, issues of stress, turnover, and performance issues. These are the things that will come up when people experience politics in the work environment. So what we are being told, therefore, is that we have to be very careful. You may be wondering why your organization is not performing the way you thought it should be. Check political behaviors. Check political behavior. It can be one of the reasons why things are what they are. Okay. But let's also look at some of the behaviors that is likely to happen when people experience politics in the work environment. Defensive behaviors. Employees who perceive politics as a threat have defensive reactions. So when we perceive it as a threat, there could be defensive reactions. It may be helpful in the short run, dangerous in the long run. So when the types of behaviors are going to be looking at, sometimes in your mind, it kind of crystallizes it that this is it, but it may work in the short term, but may not be useful in the long term. Avoiding action. One of the ways that people show defensive behaviors will be avoiding action. They will in a subtle way not do what they are supposed to do. They will not do what they're supposed to do. Overconforming. Sometimes also people will try to go to lengths that is not really being needed. So it means that when we talk about overconforming, it is an attitude where you see people are overdoing it because they feel that, look, the politics is so much heavy on them that they have to overstretch to give an indication that, look, you think I'm a bad person, but I'm a good person. It's one of the ways. Okay. Backpassing is also where we always blame other people. You see, playing dumb. Sometimes people know what it is, but they are afraid to say it. So they are avoiding to say something that you know, or intentionally also stalling progress. These are potential behaviors that can come up as a result of defensive behaviors. And when you talk about defensive behaviors, do not think that it's only about kind of fighting back onto your turf. No, you can sometimes show these behaviors by the points that I've just mentioned, by exhibiting these kind of behaviors in the work environment. Now, when somebody is overconforming, it could be as a result of the stress that they are under. They are seeking recognition so badly. Okay, it is a way that people show that indeed they want to be noticed. They are feeling the heat of the politics, and instead of them fighting back, they respond back by overconforming, backpassing, playing down. They know what it is, but they will pretend as if they do not know. Avoiding blame. Some also will use that approach. They call it bluff. They play safe, and very typical in the public sector where normally people they know that this work is done by so and so, I can step in to help the situation, but they'll play safe. They play safe by not getting involved at all. They will tell you that, well, the person that is supposed to work on this project is on leave and we'll be back in 2 months' time. They are playing safe. They don't want to touch anything that eventually may lead to some difficulty. The person comes and says that, well, why did you give it to this other person? Why didn't you wait for me to come? People play a lot of these kind of games in the work environment, justifying. Sometimes people also will justify very bad behaviors, even though they know in their heart of hearts that it is not, what they are doing is not good, but they will justify it. They use people as scapegoats, scapegoating. Okay. So in a way, people are using politics to do something to them they don't like, and they also pass it on by using others as scapegoats. I'll go through this and I'll pause briefly. Then, avoiding change. There are some people that they know that if I change the approach I'm working, it's going to give you a good outcome, but they will not, as a way of defending or defensive behaviors as a result of the politics that they experience. And these things, if you do any of these points that I've mentioned, you may seem to be getting away in the long run, but in the short run, it's going to create a certain image for you. And all of a sudden, people will perceive you in that light. And you don't want that to happen. Okay, so as I keep saying, when we learn these things, we need to situate ourselves in the conversation we are having and see how we can improve on ourselves. If you are always passing the buck, if you are always blaming other people, if you are always protecting your turf, whether the arguments are are not in your favor or not, you create a certain image. Well, so somebody is asking that, what do you mean by power is meaningless unless it is intricately linked with its base? Now, I'm sure we've spoken about the basis of power. Okay, it's linked, it's going to the base of power. And you have the answer in your notes. If you go back, maybe let me just show you quickly and then I'll come back. See, so you have power tactics. You have these are bases of power. You see, it is meaningless. I mean, if you talk about legitimate power, we have explained it. If you go back to your lecture notes, you see that we spoke about legitimate power. We spoke about the personal appeals. We spoke about all these other ones. Okay. Now, power will be meaninless when it is, if you look at the most effective, rational persuasion, inspirational appeals, and consultation. And in fact, if you talk about even the two types of power, I see the issue of power will also be meaningless. Okay, sorry, power will be a bit more of meaning if you go back to the question that you asked. Yes, it will be meaninless unless it's linked to its base, because the point is that if you look at the types of power, the power bases, you will notice that all these power bases, they achieve a certain end. Okay, but they are effective ones: rational persuasion, inspirational appeals, and consultation. These are the kind of power bases that will give some meaning. If it is not giving meaning, that is meaningless. These are the kind of power that when you are able to practice, you are likely to get results out of it. The other ones, yes, they may not be sustainable. That is why we say that it is meaninless. You have to keep on doing the same thing, which is not giving you the results that you are supposed to get. But another point that you must also notice about the reference power and expert power, we spoke about the fact that when we are dealing with expert power, that is the kind of power that you want to have in the work environment, because that is more like a resource that you have that others want it. And that's a meaningful power. Okay. We also spoke about the reference power is the kind of personal traits and behaviors that you show that makes you preferred over other people. That, sometimes we come across people and we say, well, this person is well behaved, this person is cultured, this person is very disciplined and all that. These are power bases that people may have. If you have somebody who is well behaved and well cultured against one who is not, I mean, which one would you lean more towards? So the answer lies in your understanding of some of these points here, and also especially expert power and reverent power. Because all that the question is trying to say to you is that any other power other than these other power bases will not give you value. Even if it does, it's not sustainable. Okay. If you look at this, even these points, rational persuasion, and if you look at this, rational persuasion, inspirational appeals are more like the reverent power. Okay, consultation is obviously making sure they are bringing everybody on board. But these are the arguments that you can make in trying to justify that the power indeed is meaningless unless it is linked to its base. So you have these things in the notes, and you have to read with a very open mind and willingness to take on board things in a much deeper level. That's why I always say that it's important to understand what we talk about in class, because if you do, you can apply them whichever way. Once I saw the question you asked, I could see my mind went straight to that power tactics that I showed you. So we quickly look at ethics of behaving politically. It is difficult to tell ethical from ethical politicking. The point is that better about ethical behaviors. It is in terms of not ethical behavior, but political wise. There's always some difficulty, but because it's not quite clear cut, but there are some 3 questions that should help us whether our behavior is politically right, ethically, or not. So these 3 questions is supposed to help us. They are not by any means the gospel, if you like. So what is the utility of engaging in the behavior? Or what is the value of engaging in the behavior? The behavior that you want to engage in, ask yourself, what is the value? Does the value balance out any harm done by the action? If the value that I'm going to get from whatever is going to emerge from it, the value is still justified, then perhaps you should go ahead. But I think that the key thing is about the value. For me, I believe that if the utility of engaging the behavior is not, you cannot be firm about it, then perhaps you should not engage in it. Because you see, if something is right, it's in my mind, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? There may be gray areas, but they're not so often the case. And then the third thought about, does the action conform to standards of equity and justice? Knowing that sometimes people will disadvantage other people so that they get ahead, ask yourself, does it conform to equity and justice? These are the things that can help us. But you see, some people, even though it's wrong, they will. That's why you see the last point. Answers can be skewed towards either viewpoint. There are some people who justify wrongdoing as good. So that is why I think that it's morally inherent for you to be whether you are ethical or not. If I want about ethical leadership, one of the key components of ethical behavior, ethical leadership, the moral person. The person who is ethical has certain values. It's all about values to a large extent. And when you have certain values and certain belief systems, it helps you. You don't have to go through these questions. You will know before you take the decision that this is not acceptable. So these are some of the things that can help us. The essence of this slide is just to help us know that it's something that must be determined to make sure that you get it right. Because sometimes it's so not clear cut that you may end up acting or doing something that you can justify, but sometimes somebody else can see it in a negative light. I think that the answer lies in your values and belief systems, really. The global implications of this issue of politics, that politics perceptions, negative consequences to the perception of politics seem to be fairly widespread. What this means that when we talk about politics, broadly, people see it as a bad word, broadly. It does not mean, remember that, it does not mean that there cannot be a good aspect of it, because I told you that I believe that politics is not a bad word, but there are some bad things that comes through politics. But at the global level, there's a broad conception and understanding that politics is negative. Preference for power tactics. The choice of effective tactics is also dependent on the culture of the country in which they are to be used. And the same thing in organizations. Now, the preference that we use, if you go back to the preference, you see the table that shows you whether it's irrational or irrational, whether it's literal, upper application or downward application. These are all differences that may come about depending on where you find yourself. If you find yourself in some of the countries that we know, like Saudi Arabia, there's a certain view of how women are seen. Now, there are certain behaviors that may be tolerated in that environment that may not be tolerated in other parts of the world. And normally the Western world has had a challenge with this. The Western world tries to force, or more or less, for want of a better expression, emphasize countries across the globe to behave in a certain way. Okay? yes, some of these positions are good, but not all the time. So anytime we talk about the preference of power tactics, we must be careful of the culture within which that power tactics is being used. Okay, and you're going to have a difficulty when you want to bypass the culture and emphasize the tactics that you think should be used. That is why I say that the choice of effective tactics is heavily dependent on the culture of the country in which they are to be used. Culture is fundamental, and that's where the differences come. I do acknowledge that there are some cultures that are not very supportive of others. But you see, can you? All right, so the issue of the preferences to be used will depend on the culture. That's the point I'm making. I'm also making the point that this same thing shows up in organizational setting, because we know that, you see, national cultures transcend organizational cultures. So if you have a certain mindset broadly across a nation, it's likely to transcend organizational cultures. So much as we are talking about the federation of culture in respect of country, they are also the same. They are alike with organizations. If you find yourself in an organization where obey before complain, okay, then it's going to be an environment where it's more about what you are told. Your views are not going to be sought on matters. So if it's a culture and people are operating in that manner, it will not be too much of a surprise to those who operate within that environment. But when you step outside that environment into another environment, it may be an issue. That is why it is dependent on the culture. I'm emphasizing this because even though I'm situating this within the country setting, it can also be the same in organizations. Yes, so yeah, if you show the view that the end justifies the means, then basically it means that the process, the view that the end justifies the means that the process does not matter, it's about the outcomes. And again, it's a culture. You remember that some organizations believe in the outcomes. Some also are interested in the process. Okay, and if you have an organization that believes in the process as a culture, they'll be concerned about how you get to outcome, because if the process is going to disadvantage somebody or cause a lot of harm, then they'll be careful of the outcome to expect. Some organizations will care less about the outcomes, about the process. All they think about is the process. So it's the end that justifies the means. So it means that once we are at the end of the year, some people don't say, but the organizations don't say that, but the operations and their thinking, the way they come across, connotes that kind of culture, where they say that, well, at the end of the year, we made 5 billion Ghana cedis profit and only 2 people died. Last year was 4, this time is 2. And they are happy to get it. So it's the end. They are justifying the end, but not the process. So if even one person died in the process of getting the 5 million, it is a big deal. That is why safety issues continues to be an issue in some organizations, especially in the mining space, because when people look at the overall profit that is being made, sometimes they care less without emphasizing the value of life that may have been lost in the process. Effectiveness of power that is still open to debate, and this is just a comment more or less that it is still open. There's no much research into the issue of politics, how people play politics in organizational setting, politicking in the workplace. In fact, one of my students did a work, one of my MPhil students who completed about 3 years ago, Rexford Agbozo is the name. He did a work on perceived organizational politics and in organizational setting. In fact, eventually we worked on this and we've turned it actually into a paper which has just been accepted. And we looked at, does organizational politics influence the way employees engage in the banking sector? And we saw that, yes, it does. It does influence. So organizational politics, the more negative the politics is, it can have impact on how people engage in the work environment. This paper has just been accepted, and I'm sure it will be published. It was accepted last year. It should be out by June this year. So politics has some influence on work outcomes. But what we are saying is that we need a lot more work in terms of research in that area. Yes, so Abigail said that the LGBTQI people will not even dream of taking their mentality of rights to Saudi Arabia. Yes, because, so you see that culture is very, very important here. What may not be accepted in one environment, it may not be a big deal in another environment. And we need, you see, education is the key, not force. We need education and really come to people's level, explain to them, if you really believe that a certain culture or preference is the best, you don't force it. You don't stay in the US and issue instructions to Ghanaians to fall in line. You don't do that. You are not going to get anywhere with it. You have to engage and listen, and let us also listen to you. And that is the way we deal with the issues of culture. Because culture is all that we have. Once you lose it, you don't have anything. So the summary and implication is that power is a two-way street. It means that it is not one-sided, even though we talk about the fact that most people will not necessarily play politics. Minority will do, but politics can be played at the top as well as at the lowest level. Even where people play politics, and when you talk about harassment, and as I hinted on, harassment comes in different forms. But I also mentioned that both men and women are harassed when it comes to harassment. But we do know that women go through a lot more sexual harassment within the work environment. So these things are a two-way thing, just that it tends to be skewed more in certain directions most times. But it is not a one-side, a one-way street. Few employees employee relish being powerless, or few employees will take pleasure in being powerless in their jobs and organizations. What this means is that, you know, most employees would like to be powerful, okay? But of course, I think that for you to be powerful, you need to know your job. So we all like to be powerful in our job, but we should be powerful in the right way, not using unorthodox means to get to the top. People respond differently to various power bases. Employees working under coercive managers are unlikely to be committed. Okay, so when people are being treated unfairly because of somebody wielding so much power over them, they are likely not to commit. And they're also likely to resist the manager. They may not come and fight you, but they will not support your cause. But you see, expert power is the most strongly and consistently related to effective performance management. What that means is that expert power is the key, So let's be more into expert power rather than all these other coercive power and all these other power bases that do not give much. So expert power is a key. Expert power is a key. The summary is that the power of the manager may also play a role in determining job satisfaction. If you have a manager who abuses power, that is what it means. It will have impact on how people commit. And also, the more political that employees perceive an organization, the lower their satisfaction. I think we spoke about this much earlier. So I'll just sum it up by saying that increase your power by having others depend on you more. 1 minute, please. Let me just be with you. There's yeah. Okay, video. Okay, so increase your power by having others depend on you. I think we spoke about expert power we spoke about expert power. Expert power is very important. Expert power is very important. So the more knowledge you have, the more people depend on you, the more powerful you are likely to become. Expert and reverent power are far more effective than coercive power, more or less. So when we coerce people, that does not give us much. It's about expert power. So whatever you do, build yourself up, develop yourself, know what you know. Be the best or among the best in whatever field you find yourself in. When you have expertise, that's what it is, expertise, or reverent power, how you carry yourself, how you behave, how you are perceived, the kind of nature that you create for yourself. These things are the kind of power that you want. There are some individuals that, when they get into a situation, even those who do not want to listen will listen. That is reverent power. Let's build our capacity in these areas. Now, when you have expert power and reverent power, you get greater satisfaction. You are motivated. It shows also in your performance. Remember that personal power bases are not organizational. It is yourself. Personal power is more like the reverent power. In fact, this is what comes from mind now as I talk about personal power and reverent power is the idealized influence. Idealized influence. That is one of the components of transformational leaders. Idealized influence. That is where the leader wins the admiration of the followers. They admire you. You win the admiration of your followers, the respect of your followers. It is like the leader is more like a model, and people look up to you. You are modeling something that's of attraction that comes through personal power, and it's the same to a large extent as referent power because it emanates from the person. It is not organizational. You get it? So that's one of the components of transformational leadership, idealized influence. When I move it up into the transformational leadership that we also touched on, it will be more into emotional intelligence. Effective managers accept the political nature of organizations. Managers who are effective, they know that politics exists in organizations and they are not perturbed about it. They know how to navigate the waters. Okay, so what I want you to understand is that politics will be alive wherever you find yourself in. And we just have to understand how it plays. But most importantly, work on your expertise. Develop yourself in your area of knowledge. Sometimes it's laziness that stops us from getting to the top. It's laziness. If we are able to establish that this is what we want to be known for, and we get deep into it, we will be known for it. Okay? We admire people who have gotten to certain levels, and we wish we are at that level, but they have paid the price. So we need to overcome laziness. We need to be determined and be intentional about our aspirations. If you want to build expert power, you might be intentional. When others are sleeping and dozing off, you will be sitting up, developing yourself, building your capacity, paying the price. Okay, the truth is that the benefits of it can never be compared with the pain that you go through, in my mind. So let's develop ourselves in whatever we do. So it talks about political astuteness can result in high evaluations, salary increases, and promotions when you are good at playing the politics. Remember, it's all about damaging people. The example that I gave you was off the cuff, but I think that it was a good one where people are consistently giving excuses. I'm not able to come to work today. When there's some difficulty that people must step in, people are not willing to make sacrifices. If you consistently do that, you offer yourself and you are willing to provide those kind of interventions and support, you are likely to position yourself well. And it will be politics, but it's a positive one. And these are the things that matter when it comes to politics, not running other people down, but really taking advantage of opportunities that come up that others may shy away from, but you are willing to pay the price to do it, because ultimately it will inure to your benefit. So I've done a lot of talking on this because that's the approach I wanted us to use this morning. And I want to pause And then if there's anything you want me to clarify, I'll just clarify, and then we'll bring the class to the close. So it was just to finish off what we started off last week, and then to have some brief chat on the way forward, and then we'll end our class for today. Yes, Matilda.
Good morning, Prof. Good morning, fellow students. Please, I have a question or clarification on the issues of politics. I have witnessed a situation where in an organization whereby the staff is a junior officer, but he or she is a very close friend to the overall boss. So sometimes, even though the person is a junior officer, the person carries him or herself with so much power because sometimes he has the ear of the boss, and some of the things that he tells him, that is what he would do. So I would like to know the best way to handle such a situation if you find yourself in it. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So I think that we discussed something when we started. My mind went to a discussion we had on organizational culture. And if you go through your notes, when we looked at the we looked at a certain model. You have certain elements in a model, and one of them is political systems. We spoke about symbols, we spoke about rituals and all that. Now, this is that's what we call political system. And I remember I made that point that when we talk about powerful political systems, we are not referring to those at the top. I don't know whether I made that example, but I normally give this example that one organization that I worked for in the past, the secretary is very powerful, even though there are other senior people in the organization who hold a lot of political power in terms of instructing and pushing things the way they want it to go. When you have a problem with secretary and you report, you are not going to get anything out of it. And later on, when I tried to understand why it was the case, what I found out was that when the organization started, that secretary started with them from a garage. An organization is in existence now, I don't want to mention the name. And this secretary stayed with them for a very long time. People came, left, but she stayed with them. And eventually, the organization became very well-established business and was thriving and doing a lot of good business. And so somehow, this individual, even though she's not at the top level as a director or a manager, she's seen in that light. And when you have a problem, it was a she. When you have a problem with this lady, and it's reported, nothing is done about it. It's a shame, though, that those at the power at the top are not able to call this person to attention. But that was a reality on the ground. Now, how do you deal with it? Same thing as you are saying. You stay off as much as possible. They cannot be your friends, but you do not unduly also step on their toes unnecessarily. Anytime you have a subordinate who has that kind of relationship at the top level, it's political behavior clearly, and you know that those at the top, the posture is that they are not going to call this person to attention. You might be careful the way you deal with this person at the lower level. Because for your bosses, you don't have control over your bosses. But normally the difficulty we have is that this person is a junior officer, maybe I'm higher than the person, so I must call it to attention. Well, that could be the case, but in the process, it may also not work for you politically. That is why we need knowledge. So if you ask me, I will just do normal basis with this person. If you do not use your power to necessarily try to call the person to order because they are in a certain good books, okay? When she does something, he does something they are not happy with, try and sit down. If you're not making a way out of it, try and escalate it by calling attention. Don't be the keyword, don't be antagonistic for those people. Because those who can crack the whip are not going to crack the whip. And if you have a system where whatever this person says is what they are going to carry through, then you cannot win. So my personal take is that be wise in how you engage with them. I will not get myself involved with you at all, unless I have to, but even that, I'll be very tactful. And especially, that is not the right thing. If those at the top want to crack the whip and they do it, that will not be an issue. But once they are not going to do it, then certainly you need to take that advice as I've given. So So this is my submission, Matilda.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Please, I have a second question. Please, I'd like to know, if you're a manager, the best way to mitigate politics at your workplace. Please, I worked with a former boss, and then when he came to the organization, he said people come and gossip about others to him. So the strategy he's going to use is, if you come and say something about another person, he will call the person and ask him, this is what this person said about you. Is it true or not? So I would like to know, like, if I know whether it's a good thing to do, or if you're a manager, the best way to mitigate some of these things at your workplace. Thank you.
Oh, yes, I think that it's not a bad thing to let people know that, well, you see, my answer is very simple. Anything you cannot say in someone's presence, be careful when you want to say it somewhere else. So, because you see, sometimes we think that it's about somebody, but as I keep saying, it will be done to you also. Do you get it? This time you are doing to somebody, but somebody will also do it to you. So if you are not able, and the approach that this manager is using may be working, because people will say things that they know that when you are saying it, this other person will get to know, and therefore they'll be very careful. I think that I will not say it's a bad approach. I also know somebody that when you are coming to talk about somebody in that manner, they will ask you to go and call the person, so the person will come around for you to have the chat and about what you have got to say. And by that process, people stopped doing that, because you know that you cannot say what you want to say in the person's presence. Now, there are also, and this is when it's bad, so you have to be thoughtful about, because that sometimes also you need some kind of information that may not necessarily be a bad thing for the organization. But what is important as a manager is that anytime you hear things that you believe are not right about somebody, you certainly verify. You need to verify before you take decisions. You don't only hear one side of the story. So as for mitigational methods, I cannot give mitigation. We have to take a case by case basis, but I'm just looking at the fact that anything you cannot say in front of the person, then be careful not to say somewhere else. Sometimes you know that you cannot say this, the person is here. Then perhaps it's not the right thing for you to say about the individual. I have to give Theophilus the opportunity. Theophilus, you have the floor.
Good morning and happy Easter to everyone.
Yeah.
Sir, please, as a new manager of a firm, how do you go about your business when you notice that the firm, there's nepotism is at its peak at the firm? As a new manager, how do you go about it?
Well, if you talk about nepotism is obviously, it's coming from some other superiors in the organization. Or is it a case that you are a manager and your colleague managers are playing the nepotism game, or is coming from somebody above you?
It's coming from those who poached you. You entered, you start working and you notice that that's the order around you. Your superiors are neck deep into it. How do you act as a professional so not to step on their toes and also not to hinder your role as a manager?
Well, if you came in and that's what they do, then of course you have to. The only way you can do is to lead by example, and also try and treat everybody fairly and be consistent with how you engage with people, because nepotism has all kinds of side to it, where people begin to treat others unfairly. I believe that we cannot treat everybody the same, but we must be fair. So they begin to treat other people unfairly. When is this person, the person will get away with it. When is that person will not. So you have to demonstrate the way. If you're a manager, then you go the path to be able to relate to people in a way that will not connote being practicing the nepotism thing that you're talking about. But if indeed you believe that it is hampering the growth of the organization, then you must also try and talk to them about it. You cannot keep quiet and say that you don't want to rock the boat. It's how you present your facts If there's a superior person, a senior person, just call them to a meeting and say that, well, this is an observation I've made. Is that the way I'm thinking, or something that you feel that you share the same thoughts as I have? You need not to be aggressive when you're talking about some of these sensitive things to some people. You have to, the way you approach it is to seek the good of the organization. So I always talk about the fact that this has the tendency to affect other people's morale, and that can impact on the business. My concern is so much about the business outcomes. If these things are not well handled, it can impact. These are my thoughts. Amy, what do you think? And sometimes you see the responses, whether they warm up to that thinking or not. If they are really deep into it and they care less about it, then you cannot do much. Okay, and that you continue to show the way. You continue to show the way. That would be my response. It's not a time to fight. It's about bringing out what you see, what you think, and then making sure that you speak up in a way that will not cause friction or confusion and all that. But importantly, you must do the right thing.
Thank you.
Okay. Francis.
Thank you, sir. Sir, please, my question is, when you look at the political arena, the major political parties, so sometimes when someone is contesting with a member in the political party, you have some people like the ghosts in the in that political party, and when you don't know and you contest with them, the whole organization or majority of the people will be against you. They will instill pains in you. And sometimes when you are a coward and you keep quiet, they are okay. But when you speak on it, they will suspend you. When we pick the two major political parties into consideration, let's say someone like Kwabena Japan, although I don't know what he has done or something like that. So, but this guy was a guy with a future who can become the next president of this country, let me say. And along the line, one way or the other, they just destroy his name within the twinkle of an eye. And like when we pick the other political party, because they're contesting with Asidu Ketia and Co. You see, and when you just contest with those people, then you become a threat in the party. There are some persons in the party, they are not, they don't have much of the qualities in them. But when they see that someone have that quality, then they begin to destroy the person's name or put the person down into a pit. And so sometimes when this happens, like they just put things, they will just come and be reporting things, bad things about the person, and all sorts of things that are not real. And the party, because they believe one way or the other that they don't do what the party wants, so they will decide to suspend those people. Sometimes they even suspend them more than the normal time.
Francis, like, wrap up. Okay, I think you have said it already. Just wrap up. Just run up. I think your message is clear. So just run up. There are other people wanting to speak. I think you are taking too much time.
Okay. Yes, so how do you cope with this situation? You know that you are doing the right thing, and people within the party is sabotaging you because they know that you have a future, you can be the next president. They are putting all sorts of lies and other things on you. So how should you go about this? Should you just keep quiet?
Well, I don't think that you should be quiet, but it's also how you say it. And you remember that I said to you about politics that when you get yourself into politics or you are actually in politics, we all play politics one way or the other, but when that is your profession, that's your bread and butter, then you must also know of the risks that comes with it. Every organization has a risk. You think that university lecturers do not deal with risks? They do. We have our own risks that we have to deal with. And so every job has its own risk, and there are repercussions for whatever profession you find yourself in. Medical doctors, nurses, and health professionals, some have lost their lives because of the job that they love to do. So in the same way, and I don't think that the politicians are better than those people, they are not. We all have a job to do. So the point is that when you are getting yourself, number one, into politics, you need to understand the job you are getting yourself into. Because the truth is that there are risks with it. And any step and decision you take, it has implications. So that's the first point I want to make. Now, you always will have people who are playing politics in a political environment anyway. And so if you compete with somebody, you become an enemy. But one thing I also want you to be assured of is that these people will not be there forever. And the very people that are being seen as enemies now, in politics especially, they also have followers. That is why politics is a game of numbers. Who has followers. Kwabena Japan has followers. You get it. So the point here is that there are people who may not be in the good books now, but somebody needs them. And for me, my advice is that say what you say, but don't seek to destroy other people. Sometimes you may have the right word to say, you have the point to make, but if your means of communicating or bringing that across is done in a very unacceptable way of seem to be wanting to destroy other people, then you pay for the price. You get it. For example, let me use Sami Jemfi may want to make a point, and perhaps he may have a point to make, but the way he went about it, you see, and you should be held responsible when you make those mistakes. So as long as you learn from them, you become better. But the truth is that in political environment, there will always be political behaviors. There will always be. But we should never get it wrong to say that when somebody is in a minority today, the person will remain in a minority forever. No. We all know that Anyidowo has his followers. He belongs to a certain part. Kwabena Japan also belong to a certain side. We know. So, and the thing about politics is that no one side chops it all the time. Okay. So when you get somebody and you think that today you are abusing them, be careful, because, and that's the point I've kept making about organizational behavior, that when you seem to be in charge today, you will never be in charge all the time. My only advice to those people is just to keep their head down. Make sure that if the pain that they may be experiencing, if it was brought to them onto themselves in a way that was avoidable, certainly they should learn from it. But if it is something that they believe passionately about it, and that is their conviction about what they did, and they are going through some pain, they must stand with it. Because when you stand with your convictions, you are likely to have other people who also share the same view. And if you do not give up, your time certainly will come. Nobody stays on the seat forever. And there's always going to be cronies around. I mean, there's always going to be people. Somebody sits on the throne and has so many power, so much influence to give jobs to other people and appoint people who qualify. There can also be another person who also wants the seat on the seat and also appoint other people who may not be the previous one. So I think that when you get into politics, you know what it is. And you must be ready for the best, I'll say, Francis. So I'll take the last two. I have another meeting at 10 o'clock, so I have to end here. And Atiemo, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thanks, Doc. Please, in an organization where promotion at times is being based on how well you are being related to the manager in the form of office politicking and all those things. Promotion is being based on it, and how you get a big bonuses and other stuff is being based on politics. It becomes the culture of an organization. It is something that is there for quite long and becomes a culture. And as it becomes a culture, production will fall, whereby workers know that, oh, even if I give in much, I will not be promoted. I can only be promoted based on how well I'm related with the top officers within the organization. And production is falling. And they want this situation to be saved, whereby a new manager is being brought on board to change this office politics or to change this kind of politics. How do you approach it when you have come to realize that it has become the culture of the organization? And we know culture at times is sometimes difficult to change. How do we approach this?
Well, I
Thank
mean,
you.
I think that when we talk about national culture, is basically how things are done here. And cultures are normally driven from the top. Okay, cultures are driven from the top. So if those at the top are carrying out that culture and they are not willing to change, then you cannot do anything about it. Now, especially if it's a person's own job, then you cannot even. But if it's a public sector job, then perhaps you have to go through the processes of challenging that culture. But you also know if you have people who are in bed with these people who are doing this, then you're not going to get anywhere. The issue of national politics and promotion and all that, it's always a difficult one in the sense that if people are being promoted not based on merit, but based on who you know, then certainly it's a given that morale and commitment will wane to go down the organization. But if indeed you believe that you have what it takes, then one of the options will be to look out for other opportunities, especially when you know that you don't have time. Sometimes you believe that this person who is, you can point to one individual that this is the cause. But when this person is not there, things may be perhaps different. But if it's clear that this is a business owner and this is the person who established the business and they choose what they do, then remember that your career is your own responsibility. You should never be wasting your time at where you be tolerated. You should move to where you be celebrated. So your career becomes your responsibility. And yes, we have to pay the bills. So it will mean that you may have to hang in there, but whilst you are there, you keep looking for other opportunities. There are some people who applied for certain roles. I know, for example, they apply for roles to be maybe assistant registrars in certain universities. They don't get it, but they go somewhere else and they get it. You get it? So, and I applaud them for that courage to be able to do that, because you don't leave your career for somebody. Okay, you do not leave your career. You do not allow one person to sabotage your progression in your career. So sometimes you have to weigh the odds. If it's clear that, look, you are only wasting your time where you are, you have to look elsewhere and move on, because nobody has time forever. Even if you are 25 years now, 35 years will come pretty shortly, assuming that you retire at 60. So the point is that your career is your own responsibility. If it's clear that you are not going to make so much, you do your calculation, you see that you are not going to go very far, step out. If you are not clear, you may know people who can give advice. Hopefully good people can give good advice to you. But take that full responsibility. Do not allow anyone to stampede your progression. Okay. Move if you have to move, yes. Okay, so let me just see this. To what extent does one the price of corporate governance minimize politics? Well, corporate governance is a whole, leadership and governance a whole area. We have a program on organizational leadership and governance, and corporate governance is important when the board is well composed. When you have the board who can crack the whip, not putting your friends and families on the board, but the board who know how to lead organizations, who can make contributions, who can provide strategy to the direction of the business. Then corporate governance can minimize this, because the board will be managing the management, and management will be responding to the board as they work with the shareholders or the share stakeholders. So there are the three pillars in corporate governance are the shareholders, the board, and management. The board takes strategic decisions. Management implements. They are the operational arm of the board. And therefore, if you have a strong board, the management can be called to attention. I have been on there are certain boards that have refused serving on them because I do not agree with some of the things that they do. And if you do not, and again, not every board I will serve on, if I look at what you stand for and it's in conflict with my values and belief systems, I will not serve on those boards. Why? Because if I'm a member of the board, we must have absolute control over the operations of the organization. And we should not operations, but the strategic direction of the organization. Operation-wise, it is done by management. But if you are just on the board just because we want to take some boxes and you cannot make solid contributions and some big submissions, remember that when the organization falls up or collapses, the board is ultimately responsible. You get it? So corporate governance is a good thing, and where they are well composed, they do have benefits to organizations. I think that so worthless organizational structure that stands independent organizational functions of a manager. I mean, the point is that what is the essence of organizational structure if it is not in sync with the functions of the organization? Organizations are driven by strategy, and your strategy can inform. There are two views. Some people say that strategy informs structure, or structure informs strategy. Well, it depends. But I believe that normally you want to start from your strategy. Your strategy must inform your structure. And if your strategy is informing your structure, then your structure must inform the functions of the people, because the functions that people bring or the roles that people play in organizations, they might be directed. How do you direct them? They might be directed towards a clear direction in terms of the future of the organization. We do not work haphazardly in organizations. Organizations must have structures. They must be guided by a blueprint. So if we have a structure, then anything that we do, it must follow that structure. Else, we are haphazard. We are not working with any plan in mind. Strategy is nothing but a game plan. Organizations put in organizational structures so that they can pursue a certain game plan. So if you have a organizational structure, it is teased out from the strategy. I believe in strategy leading to structure. But the occasions also that if you look at the structure that you have certain expertise and knowledge in the organization that can inform the strategy that you must do. For example, you have hired somebody who is into, let's say, human resource management, but you realize that in the person's work engagement, the person is so very good at, let's say, IT and all that. Meanwhile, IT is not a major part of your work. Is it possible for you to introduce IT as an aspect of your work? In this case, if you do that, then it's going to inform your strategy. So you have structure informing strategy. But broadly, as I said, you want strategy to inform structure. And the question about worthless organizational structure, that stands independent. If your structure is independent of the functions, then it is worthless. It is, because there might be that synergy. Your structure must fit the functions. Why do you have a structure if you don't want it to be followed? So your structure must fit, okay, the functions. Whatever we do at work, I am a lecturer in the University of Ghana Business School. The role I play, it fits into the business school's agenda, and the business school agenda fits into the college fits into the university-wide. You get it? So if you have a structure that is independent of the function, then it's indeed worthless. But then there's no communication between. It's like you are an organization, we are all doing our own thing. There's no coordination towards a certain end. That is what this means. All right, so let me use the next 1 minute and then we wrap up I have to move into another meeting right now. So this will bring us to the end of our discussions. And you are going to have a sitting exams, as you know. There will be one compulsory question, 2 other questions, select 1, 2 questions. You may, I'm thinking about 1.5 hours for 2 questions. And your IA, I'll do you IA, but the IA will be after your exams. I know that it's not practical. We have to cover what we have covered, and you have to do IA. So you do your IA after your last paper. Then I'll give you an IA, and then we can end it there. So this is how it's going to be broadly. If anything changes, you will be notified, but that is how it's going to be. So on that note, we will want to wish you well in your journey. Some of you will meet again, some of you may not meet again, but whichever way it is, I hope that you've learned something. I'm not taking any question at all. So I hope that you've learned something, and I can only wish you well. I'll give your rep just one moment. If he has got something to say, then we'll bring the class to a close.
All right, Prof. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. It's been a very interesting session so far, and we are always motivated and inspired with your lectures. Thank you so much, and we are looking forward to having an interesting exams and also the IA. I'm sure most of my colleagues were laughing or we're just smiling when you mentioned the IA after the exams, because people have plans. But I'm sure the date will be communicated.
But they want to travel or something.
Yeah, I guess some will be getting married, some will be going honeymoon, some will be doing a lot of things. So I'm sure, but I'm very certain you will communicate the date prior, then we will know what to do, please.
Marriage will always be with us. Okay, so you know, you need a degree for marriage to be very interesting. Okay, marry and not have money, and you know what it is. So your degree is a source, it's a potential source of putting you well. It is not the only thing, but it plays a very important role. So I think that I can decide to give you IA today and ask you to submit in 2 weeks' time, but that would not be fair. And I like to practice what I preach. It does not make sense for me to give you IA submit when you are preparing for your exams. I don't think that I would like to do that. I would rather will give you, so after your last paper, I'll give you about maybe 2 weeks or so to do an IA, and that should be fine. Okay, I think it's a balanced and a proper way. Those who are married can marry. We are also there. Thank you very much. We enjoy every moment we spend with you. Grateful. Okay, so Wachi and all the rest, I wish you well, and I'm sure that you'll be okay in my exams. You will be fine, no doubt at all. Your questions and all these other things are very clear to me that you are following. And when you move on, make sure that you work hard in your various areas, whether it's marketing or HR or finance. Please apply yourself, because it will make a huge difference. When you finish, you will know what I'm talking about. You have a master from the University of Ghana Business School. It is a big deal. So don't play with it, and you will see the benefits there. So on that note, Andrew, you can always get in touch if you have to, but I wish you well. And let's see you when we see you. So all the best. So we'll end the class. So see you then.
Thank you, Doc.